Well, good evening. Had an interesting thing today. Our conference president had asked, he started a Facebook page as a way for the pastors of this conference to be able to communicate and give us more of a connection in a time when we're separated from our congregations. We're also separated from getting together, those who are in churches close enough to get together. We're 3 hours from the nearest church. And one of the things that happened on this Facebook page, it's kind of just happened, so it's unscripted as far as where we're going, how we're doing it, things people are posting. And one of the pastors posted his testimony, and the conference president said, "That's great, and could more people share their testimony?" So, actually the other night as I was in here praying after work, God just started to bring all these things to my mind, and I knew there was a reason why he was doing that, where he was going. And then as I was sitting there today, I had the thought, he wants me to write down what he was bringing to mind and reminding me of. And I guess you call it my testimony. It's interesting because it's talking about the courses we have in life and the corrections, the changes that God makes, the miraculous things in many cases that God does to change the course of our life. And when I was early 20s maybe, we attended a church up in Maine. And for Sunday school for a while, each of the adults in the church, for that morning, Sunday morning, for the Sunday school, they gave their testimony of how God brought them to being a Christian. I got to hear my dad give his complete testimony once, and that's the only time I've ever heard him tell the whole story this way, up to that point. And it was something that stuck with me, and the way he started it is he said when he was a child, he had a dream, and it was like a nightmare. It imprinted on his mind so deeply. And in this dream, he's on a spaceship, and he's traveling through just the empty expanse of space. And he was impressed with this pressing, deep thought, this urge that there was another spaceship on a trajectory that would cross. And once it crossed, once that rendezvous had been made, it would continue on, and it would never come back to where he was again. And he had to make the transition to this other spaceship. It was the most pressing thing. He woke up, and that gripped him, and he said that had always stuck with him. And as he gave his testimony, he likened that imperative that he had to get on this other ship to this dream he had as a child, and that God had impressed him with this in spite of the background he had. So then in writing my own testimony, I had to start with his because it just ties together so much to see the hand of God working. And I started it out, the way I wrote it is, I shouldn't be here. If it wasn't for God reaching down and completely turning over, tearing apart, changing, redirecting in a dramatic way the order of my life and my father's life, my life would have been very different. My father came into this church an atheist, a devoted communist, someone who was out to overthrow this country and set up a communist government. He was seeking the meaning of truth in this world. He was raised in a dead formal church. He had rejected Christianity because of what he saw and the way that people that claimed to be Christians behaved. And he was trying Eastern religions. He was, if you know anything about this, is like the late 60s, early 70s. This is like 1971 when he came in here. All of the hippie stuff, the new age, the drugs, everything's going on, and he's trying these to find out. He was a hippie. He'll claim that he was a hippie. Imagine a Fidel Castro beard, combat boots. I've seen pictures of him from that time. It's pretty funny to see your parents from that long ago. And he came into this church and he was looking for truth. He was searching for truth. God had caused someone from this church way back then to pick up a hitchhiker. And as they drove this hitchhiker, they shared the gospel. And they told him about this church. And they told him about God moving. And that hitchhiker was a college student, was a hippie, somebody who knew my dad, my parents, sort of somehow. They were students at Northeastern University. And my parents, my dad in particular, some of the kids he hung around with, I don't know the whole story, he's never explained that part, but one Sunday morning, a carload of them, hey, we're going up to that church in Haverhill, you want to come with us? And as I understand it from people who are here in this church, maybe 100, 200, and maybe more than that of these hippies came to this church, not all at once, so usually a couple carloads at a time. And my dad just came along that Sunday. It was January. Came in a communist, came in an atheist, came in not believing, left a Christian. He came to this altar, I'm standing in front of right here, and he prayed, and he gave his heart to God. Doesn't mean his head was entirely straight. God has to work with all of us to get us where we need to be. He went home, told his fiancée, I got saved. And she said, you're crazy. She took the ring off, threw it at him, slammed the door, refused to hear him when he rang the phone. And it was off. And it was just a couple of weeks to go till they got married. And he was devastated. He spent a lot of time fasting and praying. And I think it was actually better for him in some ways. But through that, and over a matter of months, he got closer to God, figured out a lot of things he needed to get right with God. And months later, we're talking June, July, they finally go on a date again at some point, and he convinced my mother to go to a camp meeting that this conference has out in Albany, New York. She goes, she gets saved. And she tells the story. She's like, she's at the altar, she's praying, she finally gets through, she's right, she's born again. And her first question is, God, what do I do about Dave? And God says, marry him. So in August, right here in this church, they got married. A couple years later, I come to this world. A couple weeks after I'm born, I was brought to this church. I grew up in this church as a child. The building has shrunk, but the memories are great. I saw godly people. I saw things done. And just a side note, the Victory Trio, as I've been told, was the evangelists for that camp meeting. They're a group. If you know them, they're great. If you don't know them, you missed it. I'm sorry. And they were there when my mother got saved. But anyways, so I grew up in this church. As a child, I sat in a pew right back there. I believe there are teeth marks from me on one of these pews. And I teethed on the hymn books probably too. I got first saved probably about age 7 right over here at this altar. And I was in a revival with the Victory Trio. Just interesting coincidence. God works that way. Certain people, he brought it back. And as I was writing this, it was amazing to me to remember how often God used the same people to work in my life, to work in my parents' life. My dad got a call to preach, and I became a preacher's kid, about 4th grade. And it was a rescue mission type of work. We saw drunks come in, and some got saved. And we saw people delivered from demon oppression. We saw answers to prayer. I can't even think and name all the times God answered prayer and led and moved and saw people's lives changed and deliverance and great things to see as a child. And the saints of God I knew from this church and the things I saw there as I grew up and got older. This was in my, getting in my teenage years. I saw things that made it so clear to me, I can never deny that there is a God and he is powerful and he answers prayer. And I thank him for that. I have never had a doubt in my mind, in my life, that God is real. And I can say that with a certainty, and I promise, God knows my heart. He made himself so clear to me as a child, I can never deny it, and I thank him for that. It's a great thing. I never fought with God. When he convicted me, I would go to the altar. I would pray. I would confess. I would repent. I made restitutions. I did all the things I had to do. But I was a weak Christian. Jesus talked about in the parable of the sower, the soil that had rock underneath it, just a thin layer of soil, and the seeds landed on it, and they sprout. They begin to grow, and they get down to the rock, and they can't go any deeper. And heat comes, and they die. Or he talked about the soil with the weeds that choke out. And that was me. That was me. I was never a strong Christian. I was always weak, up and down, in and out. By my late teens, I was established on my own course away from God. I still went to church. I lived at home. My parents like, you're going to go to church. You're going to live the way we want you to. I did. I didn't fight them. I did my own thing when I was away from them, but I did not fight them. I still went to church, but that was the whole depth of it. Unless God really got a hold of me and I'd get back up, but it wasn't a willful rebellion. I call it a dead drift. What's a fish do when it dies? It drifts back down the river. That's what I did. I just drifted. I even spent a semester at a great Bible college called Penview. They've come here. I did great there. I was spiritually doing well, but every time I went back home, I'd go back to the old course, to the wrong way, to the way away from God, to drifting. And after one semester, I came home. I got back in my job. I had a girlfriend. I had my life ready to go. I got my first job in aviation. I love airplanes. I love aviation. This was my first job, and I would have done it for nothing. They paid me. That was great. To do what I loved and get paid for it too. And God had a catastrophic intervention in my life. There'd been a few times he'd shown his power in my life, preserving me when I didn't deserve it. I can say that for sure. But he did. But in this intervention, I found out the job that I was working, it was a government contract. It's over in 2 weeks. Contract ends. Sorry. Wish we could keep you. There is no money. It's the way the government works. Something opens up, we'll give you a call. Next week, find out the girlfriend is not quite so devoted to me. And between the depression, the anger, all the things you go through in a terrible breakup, didn't eat, hair fell out, you name it, didn't sleep, I turned back to God. And he made it clear, go back to Penview. Okay, God, I don't want to fight that. There's obviously nothing here. The job's done. The girlfriend is gone. At least I didn't lose my truck, or I'd have to write a country song. And so I go back to Penview, and it was a great year for me, spiritually growing and encouraging. And that was a year, believe it or not, the Victory Trio was the evangelist for the school revival. In that revival, Sister Judy Williams, who was the pastor of the trio, she had lost her ability to hear because of a heart condition, her blood pressure changes, could no longer sing or play her guitar. And in that revival, during the revival, somebody died. They had promised to sing at his funeral, and by faith we prayed. A group of people prayed and anointed her, and God gave her back her hearing to be able to sing and to play. And they went out in the middle of the revival. They did a funeral for this person and came back. And it was an amazing time that whole year. I spent so much time. I'd take the time. I'd skip lunch 3-4 days a week, go into my room, fast and pray, talk to God, what do you want me to do with my life? Another question. Should I get married? Who should I marry? Is there somebody here? And I'd love to say, God, boom, there's your answer. Here you go, Josh. This is what I want you to do, and this is who you're going to marry. I didn't get that. I left Penview at the end of the year. I knew that I did not have to go. God wasn't telling me, go back. I go back and get a job. I did get jobs. Continued on. No girlfriend. Every time I'd been interested in a girl, and I know there were a few that were interested in me, this is talking 4 or 5 times, God clearly let me know, no, she's not the one. No. Okay, God. I can't think of a better place to find a wife, and I leave it in your hands. And I had a time actually sitting on the beach up at York Beach after dark, next to the ocean, and crying and praying, and God, what do you want me to do? What am I going to do? And ultimately, God, I give this to you. I don't know what you want me to do. I know what you want me to do for work. I don't understand about a wife or a girlfriend or even a friend. I don't know many girls out here in this part of the country, and the best chance I had was Penview. Well, God did have it planned. Somebody that I knew, but we had never really talked. He worked it out in, I don't know, August, September. We became good friends and started writing. And she's now my wife, and she's a godly woman, dedicated. And until just a few years ago, I never knew that before I ever met her or she ever met me, God had talked to her about being a pastor's wife. And she said yes. I just never told anybody. Didn't even tell me until after we were married for 18 years. Go figure. But God was working that way. He had a plan going that way. I just didn't know it. I did not know what was going on. So that changed the course of my life. But you know what? I had another prayer, and I told you about this other prayer, and that was, God, what do you want me to do with my life? Well, He didn't give me anything. I love aviation. I was already an airplane mechanic. I already had my certification. I went back to aviation. God has blessed me, given me good jobs. In fact, right now I'm at the best job I've ever had. And it's a great job to help me with the ministry here, with the time, and everything is good. And it wasn't even a job I was interested in. He dropped it in my lap. I wasn't interested when I had my first interview even. And he kind of had to give me a fleece to let me know this is really where he wanted me to go, because it was like too good to be true. And I thank him for that. That's just God being good when I didn't deserve it. And none of us can claim that we deserve anything good from God. And he has been so good to me that way. I did mention during this time, he'll be served my life. One time, not far from here, there's an interchange. And if you drive around Boston, you know 128 is a lousy road. And Route 93 goes right into the heart of Boston. And where 128, or 95 as you would call it in Woburn, crosses 93, there's a very jammed and backed up and horrible interchange of the two highways where they cross. One day as I was just about to go underneath Route 93, somebody cut me off. I went 50 miles an hour. I plowed into the concrete barrier in the middle of the road. My truck went right up on top of it. I was told this by someone who stopped, who saw what happened and couldn't believe I walked away. And truck went up on the barrier, started to tip over. I came back off it. I don't remember much because my head hit the window. And I was just kind of out of it at that point. I remember coming off of it and realizing I was headed towards 3 lanes of stopped traffic. And I couldn't even think to turn the wheel, hit the brake, nothing. And I just went right towards that traffic, and God opened up a hole. I went right through and stopped in the breakdown lane. Didn't touch a car. Nobody hit each other. Toolbox fell off the back of my truck, landed in the middle of the highway. The guy that had landed in front of it stopped. He jumped out of his car, walked around, said, "This yours?" I said, "Yep." And he kicked it across a lane of traffic to me, got back in his car and left. And as I said, someone else pulled over to make sure I was okay, and was shocked to see me out just walking around. Truck's completely totaled. But when everything came to a stop, and the truck finally stopped shaking, and things were no more flying around. I had school books and all kinds of stuff. One of my textbooks was balanced, flat, perfectly on top of the steering wheel. If you don't believe in angels, I feel sorry for you. That's just one example of the many times he's taken care of me and just done amazing things. But he still hadn't given me an answer. I'm a preacher now. When did that happen? Guess what? My oldest, who's 18, going to be 18 next month, makes me feel old, was a baby. And we were at Victory Grove Camp Meeting again, where my mother got saved. And with my wife, and the baby's there, and she's in the pack and play, because she's just an infant. God called me to preach then. Spoke to me in a clear voice that I can never forget. Because I will say, if he hadn't, there are times I wouldn't doubt that he existed, but I would doubt he'd really called me to preach. But he spoke to me in a clear voice, like he was standing next to me. And I can show you the place at the altar at that camp meeting where he did it. And I can tell you what was going on at the time, and there was no one near there. The nearest person was 25, 30 feet away. And yet, it was just like he was standing next to me, and he said 3 words, "Speak for me." And I can never forget that voice. I can never forget that call. And then, of course, Lord, is that you? And what do you mean? And then, Lord, well, do I quit my job and sell my house and go back to Penview? What do you want me? And I very clearly got the leading, no, do what you're doing. Prepare yourself. This 9 years, 8 years maybe, after something like that, after leaving Penview, after that year of praying, guess what? It was another 7 years, something like that, till God finally opened the door here, and he spoke to me before they ever called me officially to come here to be the pastor. He had already spoken to me and said, "Here's where you're going to get your sermons, because you're going to be the pastor there." So what I already knew before they called me, I would be the pastor here. This is where God wanted me. This is where he would direct me. And it was because I followed his course. And I can say now I don't entirely understand God's... Why did he wait? Why did he wait again? Except he's patient. I mentioned to you about that soil with the rock underneath it, that the seed couldn't grow. And I can see now that there were lessons. There were things God needed. He needed to break up that rock. He wanted his own foundation underneath there. But not a rock that's going to kill and destroy the work that the Holy Spirit wants to do. Instead, something deep, something strong, something with a foundation that won't fall over, that won't collapse, because it's built on him, built on his word, built on what he wants. That's what it took for me. I'm slow with a lot of stuff. I grew up with ADD, and I didn't pay attention. Sometime around 8th grade, all of a sudden, hey, school isn't so bad. I can pay attention now. Doesn't mean that I still don't get distractible. I do, but God helps me. And I've just been a little bit slower about everything. That's how it happens. But God is good. He's been teaching me. He's still teaching me a lot of lessons. I don't learn the first time. How many of us do? First few times. Learning what it means to be really surrendered to God. The work of his Holy Spirit, sanctifying, purifying, cleaning out, digging out, bringing things up that I didn't know were there. Lord, take it away. And some things that I do know were there, and I really don't want God to see it. He already does. I can't hide it from him. Just, Lord, take it away. That's the answer. God reached down and changed the course of my parents' lives, gave me a praying mother, probably the only reason I think I'm still alive, a Christian family, which is worth more than anything in this world, any heritage that could be left to you, gave me a childhood full of evidence of his power that I can never explain away or ignore, saved my life more than once, gave me a career in aviation, something I had to give to him. God I lay it at your feet because I don't know where you want me to go. And he has asked me, would you give it up if this church is blessed with people and to the point that, Lord, only thing I can say is yes. My life is yours. I can't say no. I'm going to hold on to that because I'll be right back dead, drifting again. If I'd be fighting God, it'll be even worse than just drifting. It's fighting God if you get into that and trying to tell him how you're going to run your life when he has to be the king on the throne of your heart. And he's given that back to me. I've loved aviation. I've loved airplanes. Everything about them since before I can remember. And he gave it back to me. He gave me a great life. Gave me blessings on top of that. A dedicated wife. Beautiful wife. I'll tell you that. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. Dedicated, hardworking. Works harder than I do. Makes me look lazy. And solid as a Christian, and I see her still maturing as a Christian and praying for our children and homeschooling, teaching them, being their teacher, their mentor, and a pastor's wife here in the church. And just, I couldn't go on. And God knew who I needed, knew the right one for me, knew the time that it had to be. She was dating somebody else when I was praying about a wife. And that was ended, and then God brought the two of us together in his time. Beautiful children, healthy, strong, intelligent. Too much like me sometimes. I wish they were more like their mother in some ways. But definitely beautiful children that love God. All of them have prayed to have Jesus come into their heart, and there's nothing greater I want for them in this world than to see that, to know that, to have them have that experience. It may not stay, it may not keep, but it's going to make an imprint. And I know God can work with it down the road. And he will, just like he did with me. I hope they learn faster than I did. And God's working here in this church. And I've seen numbers go up, I've seen numbers go down. I've been depressed, I've been, Lord, is it done? Is it time to shut the doors? And he's given me the encouragement, this is the place you need to be, and do what you can. So I am. I thank the Lord for that. I pray that it's a blessing. It's a blessing to me. It's a blessing in my life. It's a blessing to others. We've seen people saved. We've seen people changed. We've seen lives changed, people delivered. It's just one of those, God is amazing. As I said before, God made some amazing things happen for me to be here. I shouldn't be here. But he is the God of miracles. And he can make a miracle out of your life no matter where it is. And he makes more miracles all the time. He's working miracles that you don't even know about yet. But someday down the road, you'll find out. Don't give up. Be blessed. Be joyful in serving him. Whatever he calls you to give, whatever he asks you to wait, stay true. Go deep. Get grounded. Let him dig. There's no better thing in this life that you can have than a relationship with God and the blessings he gives to his children because he loves them. And I am so blessed. And I want that to be a testimony. My parents are blessed. My sister and I are both serving God. There's nothing better to have than your children serving God. And I know they have it, and I pray my children do as well. And I pray in your life, you're serving God. Give it to him. He knows best.